Dover Beach. This celebrated poem begins, "The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits." This is a poem written by Matthew Arnold, who in his day, in the mid-19th century, was a well-known poet. In fact, he was professor of poetry at Oxford. Little of his poetry is remembered today, except this one extraordinary poem, one of the most frequently referenced poems ever written. And I think of it often and often wonder what Matthew Arnold would have thought of the fact that, while the rest of his poetic works have vanished from memory, from the corporate memory, this poem alone has survived with an extraordinary force that is hard to sum up. It's frustrated commentators a great deal. I think it's very clear and unmistakable, and extraordinarily short for what you expect. Even if you know the poem pretty well, as I do, every time you come back to it, you're shocked by how quickly it's over. So the sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits, and because the poem is called Dover Beach, we know where we are. And this scene in front of that faces the poet himself was the scene of his honeymoon, and it was quite possible that he wrote it or drafted it or thought it up, or it came to him at that time when he was in Dover, a little seaport on the south coast of England, with an enormous iconic force for the English and to some extent for the world. The straits that the poet is looking out on, upon which the moon lies fair, were once land. Perhaps that's a bit obvious, but or maybe not. These straits, this water, the English Channel, La Manche, the French call it, which intervenes between the island of Britain and the mainland of Europe, France initially, and then the rest of Europe, that these straits were once land, and not very long ago, less than 10,000 years ago, people walked to and fro from what is now France to what is now Britain, until water came and cut Britain off, and turned it into the island nation, the seafaring nation, thanks to which their seafaring, perhaps more than anything else, the British became the owners of, the instigators of, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, of all empires in human history. This is not necessarily something to be proud of. I think we could be much prouder of having left other countries to their own devices. But of course, it does make a country illustrious, as Rome was once, and arguably America now, if you are in charge of an enormous empire. So this scene, the scene where Britain meets the sea that separates them from the rest of the world, and that is the moment where, as a Briton, you can look out and see emblematically the rest of the world. This place, famous also for seafarers, for people coming to Britain from anywhere else, coming to the south coast and seeing the extraordinary cliffs of chalk, the White Cliffs of Dover, famous for their appearance. And so this is where Matthew Arnold was spending his honeymoon. He goes on the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. I know how that is, because I actually live on this coast looking out towards France, where the light gleams and is gone. Not in Dover, but nearby. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. It's lovely to think, perhaps they have been in bed, he's asking her to rise in her nightgown, or stark naked perhaps, and come to the window. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return high up the high strand. No, just simply up the high strand. Begin and cease, and then begin again. No, that's not right. Begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Now, you might think that's a little arbitrary. Why should you be sad about the sound of the pebbles? But if you've ever lived close to that sound, and sound won't do it, you need the little pebbles that compose a pebbled beach like the ones that largely mark the south coast of England and many other coasts. If you have that sound in your ears, you will know that if not an eternal note of sadness, it's an eternal note. There's something extraordinary, ineffable, and you can't help thinking how many, many generations of humans have listened to this particular sound, and that is what inspires Arnold to the next stanza, which begins, Sophocles, long ago, heard it on the Aegean, his sea, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. And he rightly says it's an extraordinarily philosophical sound when you hear it. He goes on, new stanza, the sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle fold. He's thinking of the Christian faith now. But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Drear is a sad and powerful adjective, akin to dreary, but more strong as a word. The vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. There's a sense that now that the Sea of Faith has been furled up, we are basically alone with the naked natural truth of existence, unprotected by the Sea of Faith. Being a good Victorian, Matthew Arnold, this was written in 1850, this poem, or 49 or 51 or thereabouts. He was a good Christian. And he writes his celebrated final stanza, which goes, Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world, which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Now this terrible final image derives perhaps from Matthew Arnold's knowledge of the classics and of the history of Athens, a famous battle that they fought on the shores of Sicily at night time, famous for the fact that it was so dark that the armies no longer recognized who was friend and who was enemy, and many of them killed each other, killed their own side. Confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. But it could apply to any war, any war in which armies are ignorant simply by virtue of being armies clashing by night, this terrible scene of human stupidity and murderousness. And there's an extraordinary line in there which for me does something that the rest of the poem could manage without, but I wouldn't want it to. He says, "Our love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new." And reading that, most English readers, I should say, think of Shakespeare's The Tempest, where the island-dwelling exile, the exiled Duke of Milan, greets the people who have usurped his throne and who by magic he has drawn to his island, and his daughter greets them in astonishment, the first human beings of their kind, other than her father, that she's ever seen, and she exclaims that this is surely a brave new world, to which Prospero says, "'Tis new to thee." One of the saddest lines ever written. So various, so beautiful, so new, the poet says to his beloved, hath really neither joy nor love nor light. And that line says pretty much what he has to say, a terrible thing, but he doesn't stop, he goes on. Nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And that extra line is what hammers into place the absolute nihilism that underwrites the poem. For we are here upon a darkling plain, that wonderful word darkling, which goes back to the 15th century, I think, certainly to the 1500s, an ancient word, and we don't really know what it means other than dark. It has an echo for me of darkening, and that, to me, lends to the last lines of the poem a terrible monetary sense that things are getting worse, that they're not just the dark plain of old, it's a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. A terrible vision to pile onto one's beloved whom you've called to the window, to see this beautiful sight of the straits under the moon, and the land of dreams that lies before them as newlyweds, so various, so beautiful, so new, and then to stamp on it and say, yes, but what it really has is neither joy nor love nor light nor certitude nor peace nor help for pain. And it's the, to me, exhaustiveness of that line, nor certitude nor peace nor help for pain, added to neither joy nor love nor light, which would seem gloomy enough meditation already. But that second line really nails down the coffin. So there you have this extraordinary poem, one of the most referenced poems in the history of poetry, and not a single other poem by its author has survived. But who would care if they could write something that anchors itself in the human mind as profoundly as this poem does, with its vision of nighttime beauty and the terrible sound of again and again the pebbles being rolled up the beach and then being sucked back in again, as though by the inevitability of human violence and human stupidity, and culminating in forces of darkness, ignorant armies clashing by night. A frightening poem to read and reflect on at any moment of human history. And there it was, coined in 1850. And we still have it with us, and it's a meditation that many people find themselves returning to. Thank you for being with me for this.